Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, not bad.
That's good.
How about you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah? Lady of leisure at home today, are you?
That's right.
Yeah?
So, yeah, so I've sent you those documents for the training session.
Okay.
And if you're ready, we can go through it.
I'm just been caught up doing other stuff. How about I download them
Yes?
and I'll give you a quick call back so you're not waiting on hold.
Yeah, no problem at all. Otherwise, you tell me when I can call you back and then we'll do it then.
No, I'm ready to just had a couple of extra calls come through this morning, so I haven't been able to download them yet. So
All good. All good. I'll
Okay.
do 5.
I'll call you in a minute or two.
Thank you. Bye.
See you, bye.
Okay, thank you for calling back.
Okay.
All right, you've got the presentation on.
Yep.
Awesome. So today's training session, we're going to cover the new RMS 3151 edition 11 revision note.
Yes.
Yep. So we'll just go through some housekeeping rules initially, and then we'll go through some content and cover what we're going to do in the 30 minutes. So with safety, you're at your normal place of work, so I'm going to assume that you know where the ablution facilities are, and you know the site induction rules, and you've gone through that. So this session is going to be about 30 minutes, and then there's no breaks planned, but if you need a break, you can have a break. Just let me know, okay? So if we want to discuss, because obviously the benefit of this session's mainly for yourself, so I would like to find out what you would like to get out of this session today.
The differences between the new edition and the effect that has on what we currently produce and whether we need to implement changes in the ITP and the physical material that we currently produce today
Right.
to comply with the new standard.
Okay. Anything else?
And if that gives me any sales advantage over the marketplace.
Okay, I'm just making some notes. So I think I've covered most of it, and the sales advantage will be a result of what we cover today, and then we'll just discuss and talk about that. All right? So the learning outcomes, I've put in some learning outcomes in terms of what we will be able to achieve after the session. So the first one is to understand the changes of the latest edition of RMS 3151, to enhance the knowledge of aggregate test methods. So I've included in this presentation 2 test methods that were not included before. The RMS T100, which is for sampling, and then the RMS T237 for the application rate of the pre-code agent.
Okay.
And then to be able to assess the test results, although that's not your responsibility, I'm going to give you some ideas and some tools there to assess the test results against the new edition of the specification, and in doing so have increased confidence to handle customer queries. So not only looking at the sales advantage over the marketplace, but to be able to answer any questions that come from the customer by knowing what our product compliance is, and exactly what you said, in terms of knowing that. And then hopefully the learning outcomes would be aligned to your personal objectives, and we'll try and cover both of those. All right?
Yep.
So the next slides just go through the content in terms of what we're going to cover. I've got RMS 3151 edition 10 revision naught there, but that's the old specification. And we won't really cover that, but you'll see the differences as we look at the revised RMS 3151 edition 11.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
So basically, I'll take you through the RMS 3151 edition 11, and it will not only show you how to locate changes within the specification, but also to be able to review new editions and understand the requirements, but from a very broad level. And just to run you through the specifications. And I know you've been such a great girl and went out on your own and gone through lots of the specifications, and you already know what that entails, but we'll just cover some of that again.
Yeah.
And then we'll review the new test method. The sampling one we'll go through very briefly, but the RMS T237 I've included in it's a very simple test method, but we'll review that as well. And we'll review the amended ITP and the implications on the testing. Okay. Then I think I've got a little activity in here, and it's a practice assessment of test results against revised specification requirements. So what we could do there is we could take last year's 12 monthlies on the 14 mil and talk about that, and then obviously then it would be, because there's more products than just the 14 mil, we'll actually look at other products as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we can discuss assess what the impact and implications are going to be for the quarry operations, the lab itself from a testing perspective, technical staff and sales, and the customers per se. Okay, and then we'll discuss feedback and some next steps. So what we'll do in this session, we'll probably have a look at the 14 mil, and then at a later stage, once you've got the gist of it, you can look at the other products.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Give me 1 second, Jackie.
Okay, cool.
So it could be in a different area in the quarry. That will be the quarry phase change.
Yeah.
Because remember, the benches are just depth, right? So you can be on the same face but different bench.
Okay.
But the quarry knows when they're changing phase, or when they have a geological change. And that's why we do the petrographic as well. So you'll find from a historic perspective, your petrographic will guide you in terms of whether your geology is changing or not. All right, and that was it for that specification. How are you feeling?
Yes, I feel fine. If we uphold to this specification, then Jason's going to be doing daily testing for the next 3 months on 10 mil material.
Yep. And that's if your customer is wanting to enforce the specification, the new one in its entirety.
Yeah.
And that's a clarification you can have, or you can take your compliance of your results and negotiate a frequency with the customer and agree on that. Okay, so if we go back to the presentation, we're looking at now the changes to the specification, which we've gone through in quite a lot of detail now. So I think we can skip these sort of slides. And I thought this Chinese proverb was so apt. It says, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. So if we want to be ahead of the game, be at the forefront in the market, we need to try and ensure that we complying with the specification. And then, but it also is a pricing thing too, right? So it's horses for courses.
Yes.
So we'll skip the next slide, and we'll skip the next slide as well, because we've done all of that. And then we can talk about the RMST 100 for sampling of aggregate. And I just snippet to the table from that test method that actually you can see there that all the sampling methods are for Australian standard, and for less than 63 mil material, if you're sampling, which is your 10 mil, you'd sample according to Australian standard 1141.3.1. For anything greater, you will use 0.32. And then for your soil, gravel, rock, recycled product, you can use the AS 1289.1.2.1. And Jason's pretty much on the ball with these. So, and we've also put in the RMST 100 just as a tick of a box for the accreditation. Any questions around that?
Sorry?
Any questions around that?
Interested between the definition between aggregate and rock product versus a soil, gravel, rock and recycled product.
So your recycled product is definitely recycled.
Yeah.
Your rock,
gravel and rock.
yeah. So your rock product is more the hard rock type stuff. So when you're looking at rock less than 63 mil, you're looking at your concrete type aggregates. You're looking at your whatever. When you're looking at soil, gravel, you start going into the road-based type material.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. So, so rock and gravel, the aggregate, because it's got rock products twice. You see what I'm saying? It's got aggregate and rock products, and then when you go down, you go soil, gravel, rock, you know?
Yes. So your top one, which is aggregate and rock products, is mainly your asphalt concrete type material.
Yeah.
Your rock products that's greater than 63 mil is more your riprap, your armor rock, gabion, that is big sizes.
Yeah.
Your ballast is on the borderline of either one.
Yeah.
And then when you're going to soil, gravels, rock, recycled product, it's talking about more your earthworks and your drainage type material, sub bases, your SMZs, your bridge abutment type material.
Yeah.
General fill. And then your gravel would be like wagga type material.
Yeah. And the locations that they've got listed there, they're all the acceptable sampling locations?
I would say it's a guide, but it's not exactly where it would be. But yes, you can sample from your conveyor, you can sample from the bin, you can sample from a truck, you can sample from a stockpile, you can sample from placed earthworks or pavement layer.
Yeah. Because then with that, when you've got the various sample locations, how can you do your correct collection like from a truck?
You can. You just need to have a methodology to do so and do it safely. Obviously, you've got to have the safe working procedures because in a truck it's going to be very different to trying to do it, from a stockpile or from a bin. Even from a conveyor, because you can't do it from a moving conveyor. You've got to stop the conveyor belt to do a belt cut. Yeah. All good? All right, so now we've got T237, which is really a big one for us, and we need to take into account this one because previously we would just run it per liter per cubic meter rate, but now we've got to prove that liter per cubic meter that we're running is actually accurate. Okay, so first of all, we've got to sample the aggregate as per RMST 100. We've got to prepare that sample. We've got to prepare a sample of the pre-coating agent. We can use as is if it's already prepared. We've got to riffle and split the aggregate sample to about 5 kilos, which to make sure that your sampling method is correct. And then we've also got to minimize loss of dust or moisture. And the reason why they're saying during that sampling process and preparation process, you're trying to minimize the loss of dust or moisture, your rate of your application of your pre-coat agent to your aggregate is also dependent on how much moisture and dust you have. So if you get rid of it when you're trying to do the application rate according to the test method, you might get a certain liter per cubic meter as application rate. And when you actually start processing and you're running production, full on production, and you find you've got lots of dust or moisture, you might need a higher application rate, but because you've determined it on a lower one with less moisture, you're now not having the optimal application rate. Okay, and then you've also got to rate the condition of the aggregate, how it has been. So let's go into RMS T237 if you want to open that up. Okay, so basically under section 2 it mentions the sampling test method, which we talked about, the RMS T100. We wouldn't worry about it too much because basically we've got that covered in our Australian standards, and that's how we would sample. And Jason's pretty much knows how to get that aggregate down to a subsample of 5 kilos. When we're looking at the apparatus that's required, basically we need a clean and dry metal container with a lid of about 5 litre capacity and with a volume of 2.5 litres marked inside, and you'll see why. Then we've just got to have a graduated measuring apparatus of at least 50 ml capacity, and that might just be a plastic measuring cylinder because this is a pre-coat oil that you're going to be measuring. You could also use a disposable syringe, so you just pull up 50 ml in the syringe, and that's what you would do the testing on. So you prepare a sample of the pre-coating agent. We've got that ready-made already. You'd obtain your sample according to the RMS T100. You'd reduce the aggregate sample by quartering and riffling to produce a subsample of 5 kilograms. Then we said we're going to minimize the loss of any dust or moisture, and then you're going to rate the condition of the aggregate. Now this is very much of a subjective sort of rating because it says, you can say whether it's clean and dry, whether it's clean and damp, whether it's got a dusty coating, or whether it's got a muddy coating. So I suppose a muddy coating would be if it's picked up any incompetent material with it, it's got any clayey type stuff. The dust could be, from processing, whether it's got any dusty coating fines attached to it, quite a lot of it. Clean and dry could be that it's got less moisture, so maybe during that process it's not being washed or anything like that, or your water cart hasn't sprayed over it. Clean and damp could be it doesn't have dust or mud, but it's clean and it's got a bit of moisture.
Which is what your pre-coat to be.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. So your procedures, you can see it's a very, very simple method, right? You prepare the pre-coating agent according to the manufacturer's recommendations. We get it supplied by the manufacturer, so we don't have to, prepare it as such. You fill the calibrated cylinder with pre-coating agent to 50 milliliter level. You loosely fill the container with aggregate subsample approximately level with the 2.5 litre. So basically this is in the 5 litre metal container, right? That's why you need the 2.5 litre. It's a very subjective test. Then because you've got your pre-coating agent in the measuring cylinder, 50 ml, you pour 20 ml of it because you don't know whether you're going to use all 50, evenly over the aggregate in the container. So you've got 2.5 litres of the aggregate and you're trying to mix it. You seal the container and mix the pre-coat with aggregate particles for about 10 seconds using a steady shaking and a rolling action. So basically you're trying to coat the aggregate. And the 20 ml may need to be reduced if the aggregate previously has been pre-coated. You open the lid and you inspect the particles. And this is a visual assessment of the approximate percentage of the aggregate surfaces coated. So if you went back to the presentation, I've got a photo there of an aggregate that's unpre-coated and an aggregate that's pre-coated. And that's what you want the aggregate to look like. And if you have sufficient and adequate pre-coating agent, it would look like the one in the tray. If not, and if you have excess, you'd see oil all over in the tray, dripping, sort of, or excess. And if you haven't coated it, you'll have a blend of what that pre-coated aggregate looks like together with some unpre-coated aggregate.
Yeah.
And that's how you will basically determine whether you've coated it sufficiently. So it's very, very subjective.
This test is a great waste of time.
And
I don't understand the purpose around it. So is the sample you're taking, because it goes, the 20 ml may not be reduced if the aggregate has maybe need to be reduced if it's previously been pre-coated. So we're not testing pre-coated material. We get unpre-coated material.
correct.
And then put 20 ml of this stuff on it.
Correct.
To achieve what?
Because you're trying to determine the rate of application. Remember I said to you at the moment, let's for argument's sake say that East Gayong and they could not accept the aggregate as well. Okay.
Okay.
6.3, requirements on variation to nominated aggregate is being expanded. So basically, if you do have a variation to the nominated aggregate, you would have to resubmit. And that could be change of facing the quarry or anything that affects the target, the nominated target values that you had previously submitted.
Yeah.
The previous clauses 7 and 8 on stockpiles was deleted. In clause 7, we've got previously clause 9 was on conformity. That clause has been reworded, and that would be the 6.1.3 now, the statement of conformity there. Okay, then 7.2, annexure L is a completely new annexure because previously they never had the testing frequency is articulated in annexure L. So in every specification of RMS, annexure L has the testing frequency that is required for that product. So previously in RMS 3151, they hadn't articulated that. They've now done that and tabulated it in annexure L based on the volume supplied rather than stockpile lots.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And when they, I suppose we'll cover it when we get there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Ask your question.
I was going to ask, volume supplied. Is volume supplied for the entire quarry or per project?
Well, they've given us those frequencies. So when we go to the annexure L, you'll see what that specified frequencies are, but it does not stop us from actually liaising with the client and having a discussion and saying, okay, are you willing or happy to accept X volume testing frequency? And that would be based on consistency, obviously. Okay, and then clause 8, the pre-coating requirements was simplified. The previous clause 9.3 was use of defect points to determine the conformity. That has been deleted. Now that is the major difference for us because we used to rely on the defect points for conformance, and now that is no longer existing. So you have to comply with your ALD and your particle size distribution.
Yeah.
And it says here conformity now based solely on conformity of each aggregate property and not just one aggregate property, or if you've got one out, then you're okay. It's actually each aggregate property. And then your previous clause, this was an interesting one for me. It says the previous clause 9.4 on adhesion capability was deleted. So which means the stripping and adhesion test has been deleted and is no longer a requirement for pre-coat.
Oh, what?
The stripping and adhesion test. Because if you think from a supply perspective, the stripping and adhesion, the adhesion agent that they're adding is almost what the placement guys are doing on site. So we still have to do the stripping and adhesion test anyway for RMS 3152, but in 3151, what they're saying is because this is aggregate for sprayed bituminous surfacing, they've highlighted more the rate of application of pre-coat, and they've added in the test method for getting the right application rate for the pre-coat included in here, which is the RMS T237, which was not a requirement before. So they want to make sure that the pre-coat, the rate of application is adequate for the application.
Yeah. No, because that's interesting because RMS, Orange, when they order pre-coat material from us and build a tender, one of the things they put in the tender is that the PAV must be above, must be 50 or above. Okay,
so the PAV is not the stripping and adhesion test. So that's your polished aggregate friction value, and that's one of your criteria to qualify for asphalt or pre-coat. So that hasn't changed.
Yeah, okay.
The stripping and adhesion test has changed. The one that we send to Sammy,
yeah,
that one is no longer a requirement here, but they've added in now the RMS T237, which is application rate of pre-coat. So, you know, when we decide we're going to add in 12 liters per cubic meter, that now you've got to test for that and make sure that you're covering the aggregates adequately.
Yeah.
And as we go through, you'll see that. Okay?
Okay.
Then Annexure A, you've got some guidance notes that was added. Annexure C, you've got schedule of hold points added and a clause reference updated. And then Annexure L, frequency of testing has been added. Annexure M, you've got reference documents that were updated, obviously because they've added test methods and all of that, so your reference documents would be changed. And then your previous Appendix A on measurement and payment for direct supply to principal has been deleted, but that wouldn't have kind of affected us in any way. All right, so what we might do is we might just take each one of those changes and have a look at it in more detail. So do you want to do you want to say which ones would be like you really would like to go through, right? So maybe we start off with the definitions in you and your, because the frequency will cover in Annexure L, and then we'll just go up and down the specification just to make sure that you understand the different changes that has occurred there.
Yeah.
So if you go to definitions, and that's on page, what page is this? Page 2.
No.
You've got it?
Page, I Roman numerals 2 or page?
No, page 2 as in normal.
What PDF number is it? Are you looking at through PDF? No.
It's
okay,
just after Roman numeral 2.
Yeah, so page 10 on PDF.
Yep. Okay?
Yep.
So you and your means, so you will mean the contractor and the contractors, or the supplier and the suppliers as appropriate. So you is the contractor, your is the supplier. No, actually, the terms you and your means your contractor and the contractors, or the supplier and the suppliers as appropriate. The term supplier means the supplier of the product, which we know we are the supplier of the product. You is or your is the contractor. That's a little confusing, isn't it?
Separate definition, I think it just makes it quite complicated.
Yes. The terms you and your mean respectively the contractor and the contractors, or the supplier. Okay, so you is still the contractor and your is the supplier. But the supplier in this case means the supply of the product covered by the scope of the specification. Okay, so the supplier in this case would be Hansen.
Yeah.
Alrighty, and then we're going to go through clause. So you'll see the aggregate properties are in table 3151.1. On page 11.
Yep.
So you've got your particle size distribution, and that's referring to table 3151, where you'll find in table 3151.2 now they've added the 20 mil. So your material finer than 75 micron has not changed because it has to be less than equal to 1%. Your average least dimension is as before, but they would have included a 20 mil aggregate ALD in there.
Yeah.
What else do we need to go through there? I think the others are pretty much the same. You see your polished aggregate friction value, which hasn't changed, is greater than equal to 44. Just below your wet dry strength variation.
Yeah.
So that hasn't changed. That's still a requirement. And it does allow, if you say, for example, had an aggregate that did not have such a high polished aggregate friction value, it's got the note 3 that says unless otherwise specified in Annexure 3151A. So if you had a marginal PAFV value, you could negotiate that with the customer. But we're lucky we're actually got quite a high one.
Yeah.
And then you saw the water absorption. Water absorption now is for Australian standard, and it's less than equal to 3%. So if your water absorption is higher than that, you would not comply. Okay? Now, if you look at all the test methods as well, can you see all of them are Australian RMS, with the exception of the water absorption, which is Australian standard?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the only one there. And then if we go further, in table 3151.2 is your 20 mil, which is a new part of the table. Because previously we just had 14, 10, 7, and 5. And it's in line because at the end of the day, your AL is half of your nominated size.
Yeah.
Any questions there?
No.
Okay. So let's just go through the 6.1, the nominated aggregate. And under 6.1, it says submission of nominated aggregate. Prior to supply of the aggregate, submit to the principal details of the properties of each proposed nominal size aggregate with accompanying test results and a signed statement in accordance with the clauses 6.1.1 to 6.1.4. So at the moment, we need to be having submitted the test results together with the signed statement and showing complete compliance. Okay, so basically in 6.1.1, they're looking at the aggregate characteristics, which means for each nominated aggregate, you've got to submit to the principal the following details. Source and geological type, which is very easy. Production plant and methods of winning materials. That can be a very brief description of how we produce the product. Evidence that the source and the methods proposed are adequate for the required quantity and quality of aggregate. Nominated target values for each property as specified in the two tables. And we can simplify that submission. Then in 6.1.2, you've got your test certificates. For each nominated aggregate, you submit your test certificates for all the properties as specified in table 3151.1 and 0.2. So it says for all the properties.
Missing a document. We currently don't have a document that covers 6.11.
No, no.
Yeah.
But that can be easily done. Because like I say, your source will be, for example, East Guyong Quarry. Your geological type would be the basalt. And then that's how that.
Yeah. And the ITP, you've only got it, as you said, to 3151. So 3152 is not covered in this ITP at all.
Correct. It's a separate ITP. Because the grading, the particle size test specification limits are different as well. And when the PTMs work with Jason, they ensure that, say for example, if we've done a PAFV, we don't do it twice. We can use it for both applications.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the main reason I'm looking at it. So
correct. So your wet, dry strengths and...
A customer can't ask us to comply to both specifications.
To what? To RMS 3151 and RMS 3152?
Yeah.
Well, they can, but at the end of the day, if they choose to do so, they've got to tell us which is the overriding specification. Because our specification limits for the particle size distribution will be different. Your PAFV, for example, will be different. And hence we have two different ITPs so that we can do whatever the customer wants. But if the customer so chooses to decide whatever they want that is different to the specification, then we've got to agree with them and then comply with that requirements.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I found the PAV in the source rock down
Yes.
further.
Yes.
We still we then had to comply with 3151.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And source drops texting, we always use a 14 mil.
Not necessarily. We can use the 10 mil too.
Right.
It's best to use a 14 mil because sometimes when you're looking at your shape and you're looking at the size fraction that they use for those, then you know it can differ.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for your PAFE and your wet dries, yeah, sometimes we use a 14 mil or a 10 mil, and you'll see that in the notes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So then to conclude, I just want to revisit what your objectives were and whether we've met them during the training session, and if you have any other feedback that you'd like to give.
Okay, so I'm going to go through and do assessment of test results.
Yep.
Of what we've currently got for the 14 mil.
Yep.
Currently producing. All right. And just on that assessment, just on the lot testing or including the source rock as well. There's nothing's really changed in the source rock, so.
We should do the source rock as well. So this will be a full compliance. So just only work on the 14 mil and then the source rock together with the 14 mil. Because if we take the scenario of a customer wanting just to order 14 mil pre-coat, then we've got to give them the full suite of source rock plus the individual test results.
Yeah. All right.
So do you feel we've addressed what your objectives were, the differences between the new editions? You're comfortable with that?
It probably won't be addressed until I start going through the test report.
Yep.
And that's when it becomes highlighted.
Okay.
Where we need to change.
All right. And then the impact for the quarry lab technical?
Again, not until we go through the reports.
Okay.
And do the workings. So all the theoretical, that ticks it off. But the consequences of the new doesn't become highlighted until I see the practical of it.
Yes.
So none of that's